Put your hands where I can see them. The officer's voice cracked the cold morning air like a whip. Tires crunched against asphalt. The man standing beside the sleek, black Mercedes didn't flinch. His palms rose slowly into the sky, deliberate, calm, almost painfully composed. A thin mist hung in the air, softening the edges of the world, but the tension between them was sharp enough to cut through steel. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with skin the color of deep oak polished by sunlight. His eyes held something the officers could not read, not defiance, not fear, but the kind of quiet strength that comes from surviving what others couldn't imagine. 2 squad cars surrounded him. 3 officers had stepped out, hands hovering near their holsters. Behind them, a small crowd had begun to gather, bystanders who held their phones high but their voices low. The taller officer stepped forward. "You trying to tell me this is your car?" The man didn't answer. His eyes flickered briefly toward the dealership sign that towered above them, Northside Auto Group. The same dealership whose spotless showroom stretched behind the glass just a few feet away, the same one that bore his name on every legal document inside. But he said nothing. The officer's partner reached for his wrist, turning him roughly around and snapping the cold steel of handcuffs over his skin. The metallic click echoed like judgment. Whispers rippled through the crowd, an uneasy hum of uncertainty and indignation. One young man muttered under his breath, "Too quietly for courage, that's messed up." But no one stepped forward. The bystanders became statues with screens for faces. The man being handcuffed closed his eyes. In the stillness between heartbeats, he could smell the faint scent of oil and wax from the dealership floor, the sterile tang of disinfectant used to polish the cars. The memory of that smell pulled him backward in time, back to the scent of diesel, sand, and burning metal. Years earlier, he had stood in a very different kind of heat. The desert sun had seared his skin. Dust clung to his tongue and his uniform. His name then had been Staff Sergeant Marcus Reed, a man who led others through storms of chaos. He had known what it meant to be responsible for lives that didn't belong to him. He had known the weight of promises made to men who never came home. One of them, his closest friend, had died saving him, the kind of sacrifice that rewrites a man's soul. After the war, Marcus had come home with quiet eyes and trembling hands. The medals meant nothing. The world moved too fast, too loud. The only peace he found was in engines, the hum of machines, the smell of new leather, the clean logic of bolts and steel. He started small. One used car, bought with the last of his savings. He fixed it, cleaned it, sold it, and bought 2 more. Slowly, painfully, he built something solid. A business born not from greed but from survival. They watched in stunned silence as the man who had given them all jobs stood dignified and unbroken before the officers who had misjudged him. Then, something unexpected happened. One of the younger employees, a former Marine Marcus had personally helped through rehab and employment, stepped forward and stood beside him. Without a word, others followed. One by one, they lined up behind him. The officers shifted uneasily, outnumbered not by force, but by quiet conviction. Marcus turned toward his staff, nodding once, a gesture both of reassurance and solidarity. The moment seemed to ripple outward, spreading through the watching crowd. A few of the bystanders lowered their phones. Shame replaced spectacle. Someone whispered an apology. The officers retreated slowly toward their cars, their authority shrinking with each backward step. Marcus watched them go, then looked back at the sign bearing his name. He thought of his mother, who used to tell him that dignity isn't something you demand, it's something you carry, even when no one recognizes it. Later that afternoon, news of the incident spread across social media. The video, the calm man in handcuffs, the dealership sign above him, the silent employees behind him, went viral within hours. But what the world didn't see were the quieter moments that followed. When the officers returned that evening, this time in plain clothes, Marcus met them in his office. He offered them coffee. They expected anger, humiliation, perhaps revenge. Instead, he offered understanding. He told them about the war. About fear and assumptions. About how easily human beings mistake threat for difference. His tone was not forgiving, but it was deeply human. One of the officers, the youngest, looked ready to cry. Marcus leaned back in his chair, hands folded. What you did this morning wasn't just about me. It's about what we've all been taught to see before we learn to look. Those words would echo beyond that room, beyond the city. A week later, when the police department held a community meeting about racial profiling and accountability, Marcus was invited to speak. He didn't want a podium. He stood instead among the people, hands in his pockets, posture steady. He told them about his time overseas, about men of every color sharing the same rations, sleeping under the same sky. He told them how fear makes us small and how silence, sometimes, is not weakness but discipline, the kind of discipline that keeps a man from becoming what others expect him to be. In the front row sat the same officers who had cuffed him. When he finished speaking, they stood. One by one, so did the rest of the audience. It wasn't applause that filled the hall, it was silence, thick and reverent. A silence that said more than noise ever could. Marcus looked out over the crowd, his expression unchanged. In that moment, he understood something essential: justice isn't always loud. Years later, that business became Northside Auto Group, the largest minority-owned dealership in the state. Yet in this moment, none of that mattered. The officers didn't see a veteran, or a businessman, or a man who'd built something from nothing. They saw only what they were conditioned to see: a black man beside an expensive car. Marcus remained silent as they searched him, his coat pressed roughly against the car's gleaming surface. Inside his chest, his heart beat slow and steady, trained by years of discipline not to react to danger, not to give fear the satisfaction of expression. Car was reported stolen, the officer said, as if the words themselves were unquestionable truth. Marcus met his eyes, not with anger, but with the stillness of a man who had once faced men with rifles and did not blink. His silence felt heavier than argument. An employee from the dealership ran out through the glass doors, a young woman, face pale, hands shaking. "Wait. That's Mr. Reed. He owns the place." The officers froze, confusion flickering briefly across their faces before suspicion returned, stronger than logic. "Ma'am, step back," one said sharply. "We'll verify his identity." She hesitated, looking between the cuffs and Marcus's impassive face. He gave her the slightest nod, a signal to stay calm. His dignity, even now, wrapped around him like armor. Inside, Marcus's assistant was already calling corporate, calling the local news, calling anyone who would listen. But outside, the air was heavy with disbelief. Marcus stood silently, his wrists cold and red beneath the steel. He could have spoken. He could have shouted the truth, demanded justice, flashed credentials, or rattled off the long list of his contributions to the community: scholarships for underprivileged kids, housing for veterans, donations to the police fund itself. But he didn't. Because he knew something deeper than anger: the truth doesn't need to shout. When the senior officer returned from the squad car holding a tablet, the silence was almost unbearable. The device displayed the registration: registered owner, Marcus Reed. A long pause. The kind of pause that exposes the weight of every unspoken prejudice. The officer's mouth opened, then closed again. His partner stared down, cheeks burning with shame that looked too late to matter. Marcus didn't move. His voice, when he finally spoke, was calm enough to still the crowd. "You saw me as a suspect before you saw me as a man." No one answered. He lifted his wrists slightly, the cuffs glinting in the morning light. "You can take these off now." The metal unlocked with an awkward clatter. The officer mumbled something that might have been an apology, but Marcus didn't acknowledge it. He rubbed his wrists slowly, the skin indented where the steel had pressed. A small group of his employees had gathered near the doorway, mechanics in oil-stained uniforms, salesmen in suits, receptionists with trembling hands. Sometimes, it's a ripple that moves quietly through people's hearts until something shifts forever. The dealership became a symbol, not just of success, but of grace under pressure. Customers arrived not merely to buy cars, but to shake the hand of the man who had taught an entire community the strength of restraint. Months later, when the city honored him with a humanitarian award, Marcus stood on stage and accepted it with the same quiet poise. His speech lasted less than a minute. He simply said that respect should never have to be earned through humiliation, that true power is found not in what you own but in how you stand when the world tries to break you. He ended with a truth that lingered long after the applause faded, that dignity is not granted by others, it's guarded within. That night, as the dealership lights glowed against the dark horizon, Marcus walked alone through the empty showroom. His reflection moved across the polished cars he had once only dreamed of owning. He placed his hand on the hood of one and smiled faintly. The same hands that had once carried rifles now built futures. The same man who had been cuffed in front of his own business now helped others unlock their potential. He thought of his fallen friend, the one who had traded his life so Marcus could return home. He whispered quietly to the air, as though the man might still be listening. "I'm still fighting, brother. Just a different kind of war." Outside, a gentle rain began to fall, tapping softly on the dealership windows. The city lights blurred in the reflection, transforming the world into a painting of quiet redemption. And though the internet would move on to other stories, those who had witnessed that day, the officers, the crowd, the employees, carried the image of his calm face, his unshakable stillness. It became something they would tell their children, that there are men who teach through silence, who win battles without raising their voices, who own not just property but their peace. In the end, it wasn't about the car. It wasn't about the dealership, or the humiliation, or even the apology. It was about a man who refused to let the world define his worth. Marcus Reed had already survived worse than misunderstanding. He had faced death, loss, and the long shadow of prejudice. But his greatest victory was that he never let any of it change who he was. And as the final lights of the dealership flickered off that night, the only sound that remained was the whisper of rain, soft, steady, and pure. To those watching his story unfold across their screens, there was a message that sank deeper than outrage, that power without humility collapses, but humility built on truth stands forever. Wherever you are watching from, remember this: dignity doesn't shout. It stands, calm and unbroken, until the world has no choice but to listen.